When rappers go to prison, they end up doing and saying some bizarre things before they actually get locked away. These are more rappers reacting to life in prison. R. Kelly. R. Kelly is one of those famous rappers who reacted to life in prison while serving his sentence for federal racketeering and sex trafficking charges. During his sentencing, his victims and survivors of his abuse held hands and prayed as they waited for the judge to pronounce his punishment. Kelly showed little emotion during the proceedings, but his lawyer's request for a lighter sentence was met with loud boos from the crowd. In response, however, the judge continued to read his sentence. "You left in your wake a trail of broken lives," she told Kelly. Although his traumatic childhood may have been a factor in his behavior, it wasn't an excuse. In the end, even a former backup singer for Kelly praised the sentence, saying that she started the journey 30 years ago and hadn't believed that justice would come through for black and brown girls. Turns out that justice was served. But R. Kelly's almost impossible to read reaction was a letdown for many who wanted to see him feel the same pain he caused his victims. Whether his stoic reaction was one of shock or denial, it's clear that he was not prepared for the consequences of his actions. Numskull. Though recordings of his reaction weren't available, Bay Area rapper Numskull is another rapper who reacted to life in prison. When in court, he faced 15 felony charges, including 2 counts of sodomy, 1 count of assault of a victim incapable of consent, and 3 counts of corporal injury to a cohabitant. If that wasn't bad enough, the rapper had a past history of drug charges from 1993. Numskull's reaction, like R. Kelly's, was most likely more hardened than you'd expect. Most people can only guess how he felt about being in prison and the potential fate that awaited him. Facing life in prison, why would Numskull be scared? He'd already been sentenced years earlier in his life, so it's possible he was immune to the shock of being in prison. It's unlikely that we'll ever know his true feelings because, like R. Kelly, we can't be sure how he felt about life in prison until after the fact. Suge Knight. A stock cold and fear-inducing reaction came from Suge Knight when he was sentenced to 28 years in prison. The former Death Row Records co-founder had been charged with murder, attempted murder, and hit and run after driving his truck into a crowd of people on the set of the movie Straight Outta Compton in 2015. He was found guilty of manslaughter and apologized for his actions before hearing his sentence. Suge's reaction was clear during the sentence: fear. Still, he managed to contain himself and reacted with no emotions as his sentence was read, even when the judge offered an apology to some of his victims in the back. A choked "thank you" could be heard from the victim's family, but Suge himself remained an emotionless statue throughout the entire process. Max B, one rapper who was sentenced to an infamously long stretch in prison, showed slightly more emotion during his sentencing. You would too if you were sentenced to 75 years in prison. Max B, the rapper and former hip-hop celebrity, was found guilty of manslaughter and robbery charges for a 2006 Holiday Inn stick-up. Even though Max was convicted, he still expressed remorse for what he had done, something that most cold-hearted criminals wouldn't even consider. His former associates showed support for him during court proceedings as well, and eventually his 75-year sentence was reduced. So maybe he was expressing genuine regret for his actions. Max B's reaction to life in prison was perhaps one of the most compassionate reactions out of the entire list, though that isn't saying much. Still, it's clear that the reactions of rappers like Suge Knight and R. Kelly had a much harsher and colder edge to them than that of Max B.